Alright, so massive news in the NBA yesterday is Giannis Antetokounmpo was traded to the Miami Heat. This was a package that included Tyler Hero, Kel'el Ware, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Kasparas Siakam, pick 13 in this year's draft, an unprotected first in 2031 and 2033, plus a 2030 pick swap and a 2033 second round pick. A massive package for Giannis. And here's my full breakdown. I do have some reading notes in front of me, so if I'm looking down, that's just what I'm looking at. I have a lot of stuff to go over, and I don't want to miss anything. So let's get started. Milwaukee finally moves on from Giannis. After spending 13 seasons, getting 2 MVPs, a 2021 championship, Giannis Antetokounmpo's time in Milwaukee is officially over. The Bucks spent more than a year trying to convince Giannis they could build a championship contender around him, but he ultimately lost faith in the franchise's direction. Milwaukee's disappointing 32-50 season, combined with Giannis' injuries, reinforced belief that the reset was necessary. The Bucks did look good when Giannis was healthy. I'm pretty sure they were top 5 in the East when he was playing before he went down with that first major injury. So the team was definitely still competing and ready to build. They brought in Miles Turner in the offseason, but it definitely wasn't enough for what Giannis wanted to do. Ownership reportedly gave Giannis a pre-draft deadline, commit long-term with an extension, or the team would explore a trade. And as we all know, he did not commit long-term. Once Giannis made it clear he wanted out, Milwaukee shifted towards maximizing its return and beginning a new era. And in return, the Bucks receive a massive package. Milwaukee landed a significant mix of young talent and future draft assets in Miami. I already went over the package, the headliner being Tyler Hero, Kel'el Ware, Jaime Jaquez Jr., and Kasparas Siakam, a young point guard, as well as all the draft capital named, the 13th pick in this year's draft, 3 first rounds, and a second round pick. These future picks will become especially valuable as Giannis ages into his late 30s in Miami. But ultimately in the end, Miami landed their superstar. The Heat have chased several stars over the years, but repeatedly came up short. I think every single person in the league that was a free agent or a trade option has got a Miami Heat jersey swap. It's been almost as comical as what the Lakers have been doing. They finally secured a franchise-changing player that they've been searching for in Giannis. They paired him with Bam Adebayo and creating one of the most formidable defensive duos in the NBA. The organization believes that its player development system and culture can maximize Giannis in ways Milwaukee struggled to do recently. This is arguably Giannis' strongest supporting cast since the Bucks championship run in the early 2020s. But the biggest question, are the Miami Heat championship contenders? I think the consensus is yes. Miami immediately enters into title contention. Giannis gives the Heat an elite superstar talent they've lacked since Jimmy Butler led finals runs. Their reputation for developing role players could help offset some of the depth lost in the trade. But if Giannis returns to MVP level health, Miami projects as one of the Eastern Conference's top contenders alongside New York and other elite teams. I think the biggest bright spot is the combination of Giannis and Bam, giving Miami a defensive ceiling that few teams can even match. Whatever team Giannis is on is going to be considered a contender with how dominant he is as a player. I know there's a ton of questions about Miami's depth. I have no worries that the Heat can figure this out with Giannis. He's a guy that makes players around him better, and his defensive impact is already going to be super phenomenal. They have the wing depth. It's just the point guard situation that I really need to figure out now. Which leads me to my next point that Miami still has work to do. The trade leaves Miami with several roster spots to fill and less depth than before. Retaining Norman Powell becomes a major offseason priority, but it came out last night that the Heat are expecting him to not be there this offseason. It's going to be very difficult financially for them to retain him unless he takes a pay cut. According to Shams right now, the Heat are operating as if he's going to end up in a signing trade or just end up elsewhere entirely. He's definitely too expensive, especially being an all-star, to keep around with their new duo of Giannis and Bam. So I think retaining Norman Powell might just be a pipe dream for them. Because of the salary cap restrictions created by the trade, the Heat are now hard capped at the first apron. Miami is roughly $18 million below the threshold, but it must carefully manage the remainder of their current roster construction. Andrew Wiggins is already seen as someone that can potentially restructure his contract to create additional financial flexibility, but they have an absolute hole at perimeter shooting after losing Tyler Hero. Another thing that needs to be addressed, something I don't have written down but I did mention earlier, is they definitely need a point guard. Davion Mitchell is not going to be a point guard for them, and they traded away their future point guard in Kasparas Siakam. Finding a serviceable, cheap point guard is definitely a priority for them this offseason. And on top of all those financial decisions, Giannis' contract situation is another big talking point. Giannis is eligible for an extension later this year, and the expectation is he'll wait till January when he can sign a larger 4-year deal worth approximately $275 million. Securing that extension would officially cement Miami's future ground around Giannis and Bam. Now into some breakdown on why Miami might have done this. The Heat have spent years chasing a true superstar but repeatedly missed on marquee targets. Since LeBron James left in 2014, Miami has retained a competitive, but never consistently elite roster, reaching 50 wins only once in 12 seasons. Recent playoff success masked larger issues. Despite 2 final appearances, Miami had become a perennial play-in team and was just 1-8 in playoff games since the 2023 finals run. The organization believed it needed a genuine franchise cornerstone in order to return to championship contention, and Giannis was the best available option. He honestly fell in their lap. I know he wanted to go there, and the Heat jumped on that right away. They've been seen as the favorites for honestly the last couple weeks. And luckily for them, Giannis solves their biggest offensive problem. Miami's offense has been mediocre for most of the past decade, consistently struggling to generate easy shots at the rim. Giannis immediately changes that dynamic. Everyone calls him run and dunk man for a reason. He led the NBA in made shots in the restricted area for 5 consecutive seasons and remains one of basketball's most dominant interior scorers. Last season, he averaged over 34 points per game and 12 rebounds per 36, putting him in historic company alongside legends like Wilt Chamberlain. Giannis gives Miami something it hasn't had since LeBron era, a superstar who could single-handedly create elite offense. And that's to go along with their elite defense that they will have. I cannot emphasize how good this team will be on defense. Another big question that sort of segues off of why they made this move is going to be the Giannis-Bam fit. Fortunately for Miami, Bam has expanded his range and become more willing to shoot threes, helping create spacing. There will still be concerns about the team sagging off both players in certain actions, but their skill sets are complementary enough to make the pairing work. Defensively, this duo has the potential to become one of the most versatile and disruptive front courts in the league, especially with Giannis still being an elite superstar. Despite not winning an MVP recently, virtually every advanced metric still views Giannis as a top 5 player in the NBA. He earned 7 consecutive All-NBA first-team selections before injuries limited last season, and his combination of scoring, rebounding, and playmaking remained nearly unmatched. Miami is acquiring a player who is still firmly in his championship caliber prime. A concern that comes with all of this is age and injuries, obviously. Giannis turns 31 and is entering his 14th NBA season, and while he's still dominant, there's signs that the clock is ticking on his peak years. He has struggled with injuries throughout the decade and has missed significant regular season and playoff time in recent years. His defensive impact also has slipped away from its former Defensive Player of the Year level, but Miami is betting that Giannis can retain an elite player for the next several years. The margin for error is smaller than it would have been 5 years ago, but I don't think they're thinking about that right now, especially because their championship window is now. The Heat aren't making this trade for a long-term rebuild. They're making it to win immediately. Giannis' age and injury history suggests Miami's best chance to win is over the next 2 or 3 seasons. The franchise doesn't have much flexibility left to make major additions after surrendering a significant amount of draft capital. And if this roster isn't good enough, Miami may have limited options to improve around their margins. It's probably one of the biggest gambles they're taking. But here's a projected Heat outlook. Miami projects to build around a core of Giannis, Bam, Andrew Wiggins, and Davion Mitchell. Bobby Portis, Nikola Jovic, and Pele Larson provide depth pieces around these stars, and the roster appears balanced and defensively strong, but may lack elite shooting compared to other contenders. And as we all know in today's game, if you can't hit shots from deep, it's going to be hard to win. Miami has clearly separated itself from the play-in tier, but questions remain about whether it can surpass teams like New York, Boston, Cleveland, Indiana, and Detroit. Shifting over from Miami, now we got to talk about Milwaukee. Not as much to talk about here because there's a lot of uncertainty on what Milwaukee's going to do with the rest of their players, but the Bucks are transitioning from win-now team to one focused on long-term flexibility and development. They suddenly have young players, draft assets, and multiple lottery selections to build around. Tyler Hero and Jaime Jaquez Jr. are extension eligible, creating important decisions for the front office. Milwaukee must also evaluate how newly acquired center Kel'el Ware fits alongside veteran center Miles Turner. I think Miles Turner's gone. They got to trade him. Focus on Kel'el Ware, focus on the young guys. Miles Turner is way too expensive to be producing the way he did last year, and a veteran team or a championship contending team is going to want to bring him in instead. Milwaukee better not worry about keeping him around. They do not need to. But for the first time in over a decade, the Bucks are preparing for a life after Giannis and have the chance to reshape a franchise from the ground up. Why did they accept the deal? The Bucks were no longer realistic championship contenders despite still having Giannis on the roster. Years of injuries, questionable roster moves, and poor draft results left Milwaukee without a clear path to get back to the top. The franchise also lacked future draft assets and financial flexibility. This was caused a lot by the Damian Lillard trade, but once Giannis decided he wanted out, maximizing the return became their priority. There was a ton of reports about how Milwaukee was being a little bit unrealistic on what they wanted, but this is Giannis Antetokounmpo. They probably could have got whatever they wanted, and I think they did. This package is nuts. Some are seeing it as a little bit of an overpay. Miami gave away almost all of their future for him, but that shows how good Giannis Antetokounmpo really is. But all in all, it's the start of a new era in Milwaukee. Training Giannis closes one of the most successful individual chapters in franchise history. Milwaukee now shifts its focus towards accumulating young talent and building its next contender. While the return may not feature a future superstar centerpiece, it gives the Bucks multiple chances to uncover foundational pieces. The trade officially marks the beginning of a full-scale rebuild, after more than a decade centered around Giannis and contending. I am filming this as the draft is going on, I'm sure you can see it behind me. But the Bucks ended up coming out and drafting Braden Burries and Nate Ament with their 2 picks in the first round, starting to build and solidify their young core with pieces that contribute right away. Braden Burries is an incredible point guard. He brings a positional length. I think he stands at 6'4" there at the point guard. A little bit stocky, but can create his own shot, super athletic around the rim, finishing around the hoop, and can also hit the shots. It was like an incredible player at Arizona all season long, and will definitely be their starting point guard. I know they have Ryan Rollins and Kevin Porter Jr., but Braden Burries will take the priority there. And as for Nate Ament, I'm not the highest on Nate Ament. I even made a joke that Milwaukee fans are going from Giannis Antetokounmpo to Nate Ament and to pray for them. Nate Ament, he's young and he's learning. He's a little bit streaky, has some questionable decision making with poor turnovers and shot selection, but he's learning. He's 6'10", can shoot the ball, get down on the post, and find mismatches on the floor. Wasn't consistent all year long at Tennessee and may have been inflated by a good team, but he's definitely a guy that after a few years could be a difference maker in the league, and he has a ton of opportunity now in Milwaukee. Outside of all of this stuff, there were some notes that came out today as the day went on. The first one being that the Pistons intend to go after Norman Powell this offseason, And this list also includes guys like Tyler Hero. So the Pistons are going to go after both these teams for their players. Milwaukee said they don't want to move Tyler Hero, but they will entertain calls and offers to sort of see what they can get for him. I think there's going to be contenders that definitely go after him to bring in a secondary or third type of scoring option that can also play make and run the guard there. But yeah, Norman Powell and Tyler Hero are 2 players to watch for the Pistons. Another thing that came out is that Miami could look to move Nikola Jovic to acquire shooting. Jovic has kind of been an experimental project in Miami and hasn't really panned out the way they wanted him to. I don't know what kind of return they'll get for Jovic, but they can definitely get a role-playing shooter that can provide some kind of defense. He's still super young, and a rebuilding team could bring him in to try and develop him better. So yeah, that's another thing that came out. All in all, this is definitely a trade that's going to shake up the East, as well as the title race out there. Who's going to come out? The Heat have now bumped their way up to that group, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all plays out, especially for the Bucks, who now have a chance to rebuild around some really solid young pieces. A lot of teams are waiting on this trade to sort of see how it played out and if they're going to be able to get in on it. I think this is going to open the floodgates, and we're going to start to see a lot more teams trying to make different moves to sort of compete with this or contend with this, especially in the East. Let me know what you guys think of the trade. I'm looking forward to reading your thoughts.